Spoilers for Dual Destinies, Spirit of Justice, and the first Ace Attorney. Phoenix Wright Dual Destinies is the 5th video game installment in the mainline Ace Attorney series, coming in right after Apollo Justice. It is also the weakest Ace Attorney game. Hold it! This is not a bad game by any means. It is still an enjoyable playthrough, but compared to every other mainline Ace Attorney game, this one is a little underwhelming. Hear me out. Ace Attorney is not a franchise known for its gameplay. Rather, it's the element of writing and the developing stories that sells these games. Part of what I love about the first game is its introduction and the small stories leading into this huge narrative with all the characters playing an important role in the final case. The second game isn't as impactful overall, but it does introduce some new characters and a plot line that further plays into an even larger narrative that rolls into the third game, not to mention that banger of a final case. Finally, we have the third game, which brings every previously established major story beat and culminates it all into one cohesive and attention-grabbing case. You have the DL6 incident, the session with the spirit medium Misty Faye, and how her unexpected failure went on to impact not only her life, but the lives of her daughters Mia and Maya Faye, which further played into their entire clan of spirit mediums being outed as frauds. Meanwhile, you have Phoenix Wright in the middle of all this because of a promise to his childhood friend Edgeworth. As a result, he leads the charge into the fray with an unending ambition to pursue the truth and to save his friends with the spirit of justice and his pointer finger, and his airbending powers for some reason. Playing through these games for the first time had me on the edge of my seat, and I was stoked to find the truth myself, with it all ending on a very satisfying conclusion. Next up, we have Apollo Justice, and while it wasn't as good, it still recaptured a little bit of that intrigue that the first 3 games so successfully hooked me on. But we will talk more about Apollo Justice in a bit. The game that succeeded Apollo Justice was our good friend Dual Destinies, and there are things I like about it, and there are things that I don't like about it. And going forward, I am going to highlight both the good and the bad. And to start out, let's talk about the good, shall we? Let's start with character number 1, yes? Dual Destinies is Athena's debut game, the newest addition to the Phoenix Wright roster of playable fighters, and she can hear well. She studied abroad in analytical psychology, and she has a little gadget named Widget that allows her to study the emotions in an individual testimony to discover how they are truly feeling. I honestly love Athena so much. She is extremely charismatic, and she can freaking throw a full-grown man like it is nothing.
What the?
She is a welcome newcomer in the Ace Attorney franchise. With every playable lawyer in the Write Anything agency, each lawyer has their own gameplay gimmick. Phoenix has his Cyclops, Apollo has his Tells, and Athena has her Widget. Athena's analytical psychology is the most gameplay-intensive part of the franchise, and it is the most satisfying. I really like pointing out the inconsistencies with characters' emotions and their testimonies. It's very charming, and I like it.
Why do I hear boss music?
Oh no! Silence!
The new prosecutor in this game is Simon Blackwell. He is a red herring for the story, a sword-slashing criminal that has been serving time for a crime that he did not commit. I think his mannerisms are funny, and he pulls no punches, or I guess I should say sword swings, when it comes to doing his job. Similarly to Athena Sykes, Blackwell has the power of suggestion on his side. To get witnesses to tell him what he wants to hear, he'll guide them in their testimony by using means of simulating banter to get them to fall back onto emotional responses as opposed to conscious ones. It's funny to see how he can manipulate his targets and then watch the ensuing reactions after. The third character I want to talk about is Apollo Justice. He isn't a new character, but his role in the story is pretty important. But before I go into detail about Apollo, let's cover the sequence of events of Dual Destinies. Despite Turnabout Countdown being the first case of the game, it actually happens in the middle of the Cosmic Turnabout, after the first trial segment and before the first investigation segment of the episode. The Monstrous Turnabout is the actual first episode of the game chronologically. Not too complicated of a timeline, but it is necessary to understand due to what I want to outline for Apollo. After his heading in the Monstrous Turnabout and his assistance in Turnabout Academy, Apollo's friend Clay is killed, and then he starts down on its character arc for this game. That bandana around his eye, that actually isn't some sort of bandage for sustaining injuries during the courtroom bombing. After all, he is wearing the bandana before the bombing occurs during the first trial segment of 5-4. Not to mention his behavior in the beginning of the trial is odd to a first-time player. Later in the episode, after Starbuck is proven not to be the killer of Apollo's friend Clay, evidence is presented that indicts Athena being the one that did the deed. Not long after the shocking reveal, we find out that Apollo was acutely aware of this after his friend's death, and what this will amount to is Apollo overcoming his emotions, attempting to pursue the truth no matter what. The reason why he covered his eye was because he noticed Athena giving off tells when she saw the murder weapon. This certainly didn't help Apollo's faith in her when more evidence such as the lighter and the security camera footage popped up to further incriminate her. Apollo decided to conduct his own personal investigation due to his unreliable relationship with Phoenix. He knew Wright was going to believe in Athena no matter what and would defend her until the very end. But Apollo doesn't care about that trash. This is the new and improved Apollo, the truest of alphas that could care less about emotional baggage. He does as he pleases and doesn't give two flying feathers about who he must trudge through to get what he wants. Sorry about that. Due to Phoenix's unyielding faith in his clients regardless of what the evidence points to, Apollo feels he can't trust Wright to view things from a blind perspective. Much like the statue of Lady Justice represents, Apollo wants to pursue this investigation with as few emotions as possible, despite Athena potentially being convicted. He is willing to set aside his feelings in the pursuit of justice. This is a strong character moment for Apollo, and I admire it quite extensively. His willingness to do what is required to seek out the truth despite the consequences shows how mature Apollo is and is what makes him one of the best characters in the whole franchise. There are a couple of other elements that I like about Dual Destinies that I will briefly mention. I like Professor Means as an antagonist. In fact, he might be my favorite criminal in the whole game. His unmasking segment and his breakdown are hilarious. I thought Fulbright was funny. He is this very animated character that also ends up being a red herring like Simon, but we will get to him in a bit. With all that being said, you might think I should like this game after outlining what I just said about it, and you're right. I do like this game, but going forward I will be covering other elements to this game that makes the writing the weakest in the series. As previously mentioned, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Dual Destinies is Athena's debut game. Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Dual Destinies. Not Athena Sykes Ace Attorney, but Phoenix Wright. Never mind the fact that even Apollo Justice got his own game with his name and silhouette on the cover. But Athena? Nah. I think it is a real shame that this game isn't a true debut game for Athena. Apollo got his own debut game, but Athena for some reason doesn't. She certainly deserves her own dedicated title, as she doesn't even have anywhere near as much spotlight for this being her debut game. Sounds like a certain similar other title. To provide a bit more context, Apollo Justice has been criticized for not being an Apollo Justice-centered game. The real star of the show is Phoenix Wright, and Apollo is just kinda there. Phoenix perpetually orientates the direction of the story while providing zero elaboration for Apollo. He just tells him the basics and then to just do it. Not really what you'd expect from someone who's supposed to be the main antagonist of the game. Instead, he plays the role more akin to a low-ranking enlisted member being given orders from their officer in charge. You're expected to carry them out with no questions asked. And even when Apollo does try to ask questions, Phoenix just goes all mysterious mode and says, just shut up and do it! And much like her good pal vocal cords over here, Athena's role should have been much more involved, and she should have had the lead role in her own game. All she gets is the assisting role in cases 1, 2, 4, and 5. Episode 3 is the only case she leads. At least Apollo got to lead all his cases in his game. Not to mention there are a lot of involved roles that take away Athena's spotlight. We have Phoenix's disbarment and his role in the Dark Age of the Law. We have Blackwell's conviction and his role in the Dark Age of the Law. Apollo's character arc, and finally the Phantom. All of this barely leaves any time for Athena, and it is a shame in my opinion. I really hope that we get a true, dedicated game for Athena with her own title and everything. She deserves it. Now, I am aware that Phoenix reclaiming the title of the franchise again was partly due to Apollo Justice having average reviews at the time. Because of this, Phoenix's character was rolled back to much like how he was in the initial trilogy of games, only showing slight progression from then and now. After playing the first 3 games and then going into Apollo Justice, Phoenix feels like a man that is well experienced despite losing his attorney's badge. I personally thought this new version of Phoenix was interesting, and it made sense for the 7-year time gap. But hopping into Dual Destinies and seeing Phoenix behave in largely the same way in the first trilogy and losing most of that confidence that he had in Apollo Justice was a bit jarring for me, and I can't say that I am a big fan. It's not fun to see this cool and collected guy that we see in Apollo Justice and then jump to Dual Destinies and he is back to overreacting to the slightest of inconveniences or revelations. To make an example of my point, I want to take this moment from the first case of Dual Destinies. The opposing prosecutor, Gaspin Payne, introduces himself as the younger brother of Winston Payne. If you don't know, Winston is the intro case prosecutor in all the Ace Attorney games up till this point. Okay, a little silly, but not a big deal. Bro, really? Why are you overreacting? It's pretty much the same guy, but with a different name. Am I supposed to believe that this is the same guy that got knocked upside the face by Apollo and ate it for breakfast? Is this not the guy that cleverly orchestrated the only way to declare Christoph Gavin guilty? Apollo Justice Phoenix adapts without breaking his bearing, and Dual Destinies Phoenix is whatever Ace Attorney Trilogy Phoenix is. My first time playing through Dual Destinies, I wasn't sure I would like Simon, but he has grown on me as time has gone on. But like Phoenix, he suffers from some of the same issues that Phoenix does, albeit to a lesser degree. My main issue with Simon's place in the game is his relationship with Athena. I don't have a problem with the relationship itself, my problem lies more with the surprise of the true nature of their relationship. I could have never guessed that Athena's main motivation to becoming a lawyer was going to be saving Blackwell from being wrongly executed. I know Athena also wanted to be a lawyer to help more people with her psychological prowess, but wanting to save Blackwell was out of left field for me. Before the events of Case 5, Blackwell gives Athena and Apollo the hardest time in the courtroom, and it is not at all hinted in these moments that there is something else going on with Sykes and Blackwell. There is hardly any level of foreshadowing here, it just kind of springs up unexpectedly, aside a passing comment from Athena knowing who he is when Simon is introduced. Even Athena gets frustrated with how much of a hard time he is giving her. And I don't know about you, but I would be pretty upset if I took years out of my life studying to pass the bar exam in an attempt to save someone I cared about, and then for them to treat me like I am a stranger and gives me no leeway of any kind. Now, this could all be chalked up to Simon just doing his job, and that is probably the explanation here, but Simon makes this weird comment when Athena is in the middle of her breakdown in Case 3. To try to snap her out of her traumatic moment, he tries to motivate her by saying that she can't give in now because she must save you-know-who. If you don't know, Simon is talking about himself here, which strikes me as an odd thing to say. I feel that this was supposed to be some sort of foreshadowing that the game was going for, and I was intrigued the first time playing this, as I was curious as to who Athena was trying to save. Finding out later that Simon's comment was a reference to himself makes it so bizarre. A better example of foreshadowing would be how Spirit of Justice handles its foreshadowing. Coincidentally, the end of Case 3 in Spirit of Justice also has one of the characters making a comment that briefly alludes to something intriguing going on with one of the cast of characters, and in part the overall narrative of the game. We have the character Dots acknowledging Nayuta's this game's prosecutor, time in the group that is rebelling against the monarchy that has been indulging in corrupt law practices that gets a ton of innocent people condemned. This mid-game comment makes much more sense to say, and is a much more convincing example of foreshadowing. Overall, certainly not the worst thing, but I thought it was necessary to point out. Alright, next is... One thing that is important when it comes to writing of any kind is hooking your audience. And I find Dual Destinies' hook to be weak in this area as well. I remember playing Dual Destinies case for the first time and not feeling very interested as to what I was being introduced to. The only thing that had my curiosity piqued was Athena's borderline breakdown and thinking what her backstory was that was causing her trauma moment. The game does a weak job tying in the first case to the rest of the story. It's surprising to see the bomb technician later in the game, as his relevance seems to disappear once he is caught and convicted. I can't help but compare Dual Destinies' hook to Spirit of Justice's hook. Spirit of Justice introduced a country that has a justice system with no defense attorneys and even the added hatred for them. You can't help but wonder what the heck happened that caused this societal disdain for something as essential as defense attorneys. That game does a much better job at leaving the player with a fair amount of foreshadowing, luring the player in. And I didn't experience those types of feelings when playing through Dual Destinies' first case.
Man, shut your...
The Dark Age of the Law is a plot element that is lightly covered up in Apollo Justice and heavily leaned into in Dual Destinies. Now, I am not going to be ragging on how convoluted the Dark Age of the Law is. In fact, I like the Dark Age of the Law as a plot element. It makes sense in universe for this plot to exist, as there are plenty of whack examples throughout all the Ace Attorney games, and even the Miles Edgeworth titles, of the justice system being the most bizarre thing to exist. Apollo Justice does a good job of introducing this plot and serves as an omen for what is to come throughout Apollo Justice and Dual Destinies. I really feel the tone and the effects of the Dark Age of the Law in Apollo Justice, and Dual Destinies does a passable job at carrying that feeling. That tone is felt most in the third case of Dual Destinies, and not because of a natural progression, but because of how much it is hammered over and over again that the ends justify the means. I mean what I say and I say what I mean, yada yada yada, who cares? But I will give credit where credit is due. The best example on how you see this Dark Age of the Law influence the plot is the students of the law school in Case 3 echoing Professor Means' ends justify the means BS. And it is alarming to a fair degree, seeing that some of the students actually want to implement this method of doing things, but we don't see much come from it. The best it has is Professor Means being a little too salty that his fellow teacher doesn't follow his same methods, and as a result he kills her, which kicks off the events of the case. So obviously an extremely chill dude that isn't crazy at all. My main disappointment in this plot element is the missed opportunity. It isn't bad, but it could have been much better. This Dark Age of the Law, I felt, was executed much better in Apollo Justice. Christoph Gavin felt like a much larger threat, and he would have been the only criminal that had gotten away with his crimes if it wasn't for the new juris system that Phoenix organizes throughout the game. In another effective use of foreshadowing, again, Phoenix states in Case 3 that the killer of the case, Darian, can't be beaten through the traditional means, and that is why the juris system is a thing in the game, which further annoys me about Dual Destinies' continuity, because the juris system isn't even mentioned once. It's almost like Apollo Justice never happened, but it clearly did. But the juris system isn't alluded to? Not even once? Oh, okay. My feelings with the Phantom are complicated. When I first heard about the Phantom, I was interested to find out who this person was. He has relevance to the story way back when Athena was a child. The Phantom is an unidentified spy that is hired by several organizations to execute classified and life-threatening missions. One fateful day, Simon Blackwell was tasked with pursuing this spy, and was able to get his hands on a recording of the spy's voice, and handed it over to Athena's mother, Dr. Metis Sykes, for an analysis. The largest note about the report was that the spy's voice carried no emotion. The spy finds out about this sequence of events and plots a way to retrieve the report when the opportunity presents itself, and that opportunity comes when he is given a mission to sabotage a rocket launch at the Cosmos Space Center. After executing the sabotage of the rocket launch successfully, he pursues the psych profile at Dr. Sykes' office. When he inevitably runs into her, he kills her with her own katana, but doesn't find the eval, as it is currently in Blackwell's possession. This leads to him escaping, but not before child Athena runs into him and manages to get a stab in due to panicking. Before he hightails it out of there, he fudges with the crime scene to throw off future investigations, which later gets Blackwell indicted, as he took on the blame for a crime he thought young Athena had committed. This case would soon be known as the UR1 incident, that further poured fuel into the fire that was the dark age of the law that began with Phoenix's disbarment. 6 years later, Detective Bobby Fulbright passed away from unknown causes, and the spy saw this as a prime chance to get his hands on the psyche eval from Blackwell, but was unsuccessful. And then this further leads into his influence of cases 1, 4, and 5 trying to keep his identity from leaking. Now, if you ask me, when you hear it like this, it sounds pretty freaking intense, but to understand all the ins and outs of this overall narrative, it requires a fair amount of compiling and reading in between the lines. At least that's how it was for me. My first time playing through this final case, I was confused a fair amount. Finding out the true nature of Blackwell's conviction was pretty crazy, and seeing Athena trying to fix her mother is also very memorable and even a bit disturbing. And this led Athena to barring herself from ever remembering these memories. And when Phoenix is trying to get details on what happened to get her acquitted, after the Phantom once again fudges with the crime scene in case 4 to get Athena indicted, he sees black Cyclops appear on her heart, which up until now we thought couldn't be broken due to their unbreakable first appearance in Apollo Justice. By the way, most people believe that it is this part right here that gives the game its M rating. Following up, seeing the Phantom unmask himself, quite literally I might add, was also pretty sick, and I also thought it was funny that due to his inability to feel emotion regularly, during his therapy session, he can change how he is feeling at will, which throws off Athena's readings. But then it led to this whole cartoon gag where the Phantom adopted so many disguises that he didn't even remember who he was or what his face looked like. And when he tries to remember, he fails as he unironically doesn't remember and apparently has thousands of masks on at the same time. And I just remember being like... And then it ends with him getting shot by a sniper for failing to get out of the base unidentified. This whole ordeal was so bizarre that I came out of the end feeling more perplexed than anything, and I couldn't help but feel a bit dissatisfied too. Up till this case, I was feeling pretty about the whole game, and I was hoping that this final case would bring it around, but it didn't. Not being able to put a face on the main antagonist of this game contributed to it feeling a bit open-ended, which isn't always a bad thing, but here I don't feel very much closer to this situation. I want to make another comparison to the main antagonist of the first Ace Attorney game, Manfred von frickin' Karma. In this case, where Miles is the one being prosecuted. The first time we hear about him is from Miles Edgeworth when we are finding out who we are going up against. We also find out that Manfred von Karma was Edgeworth's mentor that taught him everything about what it means to prosecute. And the whole thing doesn't sound optimal for us when Edgeworth tells us that Manfred has been on his grind for 40 years and hasn't lost one case. Oof, this guy is not sounding very good. But I'm sure he'll be alright.
Objection!
This guy is the guy that looks like he means business, and he is not here to play any games. And right off the get-go, it is clear that this guy is running the show. Even when the judge tries to wrestle control back to do his job, he pansies out immediately. To make matters worse, it even starts out going his way, and Phoenix almost loses the case in a matter of minutes, but only after asserting his right to cross-examine the witness. Only then can we breathe a slight sigh of relief. Even with our lifeline, this guy freaking Von Karma is objecting to every last thing that comes out of our mouth, and it is hard to get back on the platform when this guy keeps on edgeguarding us. My point is, in highlighting all of this, is to show how much more of a threat someone like Von Karma is. Additionally, as the case progresses, this guy is doing all he can to ensure he gets his guilty verdict. Now that 40-year win streak is starting to make more sense now. My initial reactions to the Phantom and Von Karma are night and day. With Von Karma, at first I was like... And then I was like, alright, enough is enough, old man, time to put you down in the dirt. And with the Phantom, I was just kind of like... The Phantom is by no means a bad antagonist, but when I compare him to other antagonists in the franchise and how much more they made me feel, it really isn't a competition in my eyes. Sure, the Phantom has some interesting moments, but it fell flat for me. You know what time it is. Everyone likes music. Because of a lack of gameplay in Ace Attorney, there should be no reason why the music doesn't pick up the slack. And pick up the slack it does. Mostly. As I have been saying this whole time, even the music doesn't escape the fate of being made! There are a few tracks that I think are alright, such as the ones y'all have been listening to in the background of this video. The Pursuit theme is easily my favorite song of the game. But I want to compare 3 different songs from each of the games in the Apollo Justice trilogy that mirror how I feel about each game. Starting with A New Trial is in Session from Apollo Justice. The descending notes at the beginning remind me of the evil that is at play in Apollo Justice, and how long and prevalent it has tainted the world of Ace Attorney. But it is quickly followed by an uplifting melody that doesn't grow too loud, but just enough to make small victories in this uphill battle. For Exhibit B, we got... A New Chapter of Trials 2013. It was a good attempt, Dual Destinies, but it missed the mark. To me, this song sounds like it is too shy to be confident in itself. I would expect that from the first game, but not this one. It's not all mid, though. I like the strings towards the beginning of the song, and later when the electric guitar is pulled out and we go Guitar Hero mode for a second. But oh my goodness. When I first heard this version of the song, at the beginning and how the notes descended further and further, it was almost depressing compared to the last version of the song. Alright, I know I have glazed Spirit of Justice a couple of times throughout this video, and I'm gonna do it one more time. A New Chapter of Trials 2016. That is what I'm talking about. That is how you do it. Man, I love Spirit of Justice so much. This song asserts victory, confidence. I almost feel like I'm ascending when I'm listening to this. I feel like I can do anything when I listen to this straight fire. This song perfectly fits with the themes of political revolution that are at play in this game. Phew. It's not even a competition for me. Sorry, Dual Destinies. To round my thoughts out, this game is still worth the playthrough. There's enough good in this game that makes it worth at least one run, but it has just enough mid in it for me to make this video. Don't get me started on the DLC case of the game. The most interesting thing about that case is that you defend an orca, which is a first for the series, defending an animal instead of a human. But that case is so boring that I wasn't looking forward to playing it again to get all the achievements for the Apollo Justice trilogy. The case of the characters are boring, except for maybe Sasha. The antagonist is boring, and it is boring all around. If I made a tier list for all the Ace Attorney games, this one comes in last place. But you can't beat them all. Hopefully one day, we will get our true Athena Sykes Ace Attorney game.